So we look forward to the discussions. So let me hand it over to our first speaker, Chris Okeke.
Thank you, Peter. Thank you, Peter, for the introduction. So I will start with a little bit of introduction, as well as on the political economy of decentralization in Nigeria. So Nigeria is a multi-ethnic, multi-religious country with an estimated 200 million people. And so it's important that this population is receiving a decent level of basic services. In terms of the political economy, we'll look at some of the factors, as Peter mentioned earlier, the factors that have advanced and hindered decentralization in Nigeria, looking at the institutional arrangements, incentives and interests of the players, as well as the societal perception around decentralization. So in terms of the institutional arrangement, Nigeria operates American-style federal system with the federal government, the state government, and the local government. So you have the three tiers of government. And for the purpose of this conversation, we're interested in decentralization at the local level, which is closest to the population. On paper, the 1999 Constitution of Nigeria decentralized some roles and responsibilities to the local government. However, in practice, as we would see across political decentralization, fiscal and administrative, these have all been dominated by the state government. And we've seen since 1999, the return to democracy calls for constitutional review and amendment. And at the moment, there is one ongoing. So the form here is the Constitution, right? Which clarifies what decentralization should look like in Nigeria. However, the practice and the function on paper is quite different from what we know on paper. So looking at some of the incentives and players and interests around decentralization, perhaps let me start with the state governors, because they are the most powerful and the most influential around decentralization in Nigeria. The state governors or governments have decentralized the political, administrative, and fiscal powers at that level and decision-making. So as such, in Nigeria, the local government, which is the third tier of government, for instance, are possibly 100% dependent on the state government, and it is quite political, given the impact of this and how such powers could be used for political reasons. Recently, at the federal level, the president, for example, issued Executive Order number 10 to implement the autonomy of the state assemblies as well as the judiciary. This is very important because it shows the willingness at the federal level to support some level of decentralization at the local level. Also, we have seen at the federal level the Nigerian Financial Intelligence Unit issuing out directives on the utilization of local government funds. This is, in a way, trying to reduce some of the leakages and identify some of the corruption around utilization of local government funds in Nigeria. So you can see at the federal level, you have federal support for decentralization. At the state level, you have complete centralization of powers and administrative, fiscal, and political powers at that level. Also at the federal level, another important players that have been a push for decentralization, you have the National Assembly as well as the federal legislators that have constitutional power to review the constitution. And so last year, we had a process of constitutional review that has started, and that process, for example, includes some issues around the federal structure as we know it in Nigeria, the power of devolution, local government autonomy, and revenue allocation. These issues are quite pertinent around decentralization issues, and we would see by the end of that constitutional review process if this would give clarity on some of the issues that I will discuss in the next. In the next slide. Of course, you also have civil society groups and traditional leaders who, in one way or the other, mount some level of pressure for decentralization, including Association of Union of Local Government Workers, for example, or Association of Local Government Chairmen, for example, that act as pressure groups. Recently, as I think 2018, 2013, we had the NOI poll showing that many Nigerians favor decentralization, particularly the fiscal decentralization, giving clear and sufficient powers to the local government to determine their revenues as well as expenditure. However, you see that the absence of or lack of access to information has also made this possible for citizens to monitor and evaluate the performance of local government. I'll move on to the next slide quickly to discuss the political decentralization, fiscal and administrative. In terms of political decentralization, constitutionally, there's a provision for local government elections. However, since 1999 till date, we've had intermittent elections across the states. State governors, for example, would rather have appointed caretaker committees rather than elected council officials manage and run the affairs of local government. Also, to show you the level and the power of the governors, they are also responsible for appointing the state independent, in quotes, electoral commission that is responsible for managing local level elections. And as we have seen in the past 20 years or so, in many of the states, you have the ruling party dominating, sometimes winning 100% of the local elections in many of the states. And then there's, of course, the lack of clarity, even within the constitution, about the frequency of such local level elections. Let me quickly move on to the fiscal decentralization. Again, as I noted earlier, constitutionally, this, local governments, they have some level of fiscal autonomy. However, in practice, there's centralization of revenue collection at the federal level. And then this is subsequently distributed to the state government for onward distribution to local government. But this never happens. And you see state government dominating and managing local resources and controlling expenditure of local government. And so there is really, there is some level of local independence around revenue collection, but this is quite difficult for local governments to collect and administer because of the weak capacity at that level. So for example, quickly, the federal government takes about 54% of the federally collected revenue, distributes 25% to the 36 states, and 20% to local government. However, this 20% of the local government is held up at the state level, and the state governor determines what happens. So as a result of the effect of this centralization of political and fiscal power at the state level, you then have weak public sector and poor service delivery at the local level, because you then lack the resources to set up the right institutions and the right human resources to manage and deliver services. So for example, the senior public officials at the local level are appointed by the state governor. And in many of the cases, there is absence of service standards or service charter at the local level to help determine the level of service, but also how people can then get involved in the process of participation and accountability in service delivery at that local level. Even the Constitution, for example, says local governments can participate in the delivery of education, healthcare, and agriculture. The active word there is participate, and this has been challenged in the Supreme Court, for example, where the Supreme Court determined that actually, the real power lies with the state government in terms of delivery. So quickly, to the last slide. So what can we do? What can partners do? Where are the opportunities for moving forward around decentralization and ensuring that the local level, you get the right resources, the right people to get on with things and deliver basic services for people? I think for me, number one, the major critical factor is around supporting evidence generation to back up any advocacy or clamor for clarity around this constitution. It's important that we're generating this evidence and using it to inform debate, discussions, and policy around decentralization in the country. The other bit is around the community-based groups and the civil society groups that are involved in accountability. How do you empower them? How do you support a coalition of people to give force and support national debate and constitutional review, for example, that is ongoing? And that is where the real issue is structural reform. That is the constitutional amendment process that will give clarity to issues around fiscal decentralization and accountability, ensure independence of elections at the local level, as well as fiscal autonomy for local governments to manage their resources. Thank you. Let me stop there in the interest of time. Thank you.